Hey friends and everyone, welcome back to Netcode-Hub channel. There is good news. I have released my first clean architecture with vertical slice layer template, which will help you streamline your code and also work faster. In this, I implemented a CQRS pattern. Let me show you so you can have a look on what I did and how I did it. And the good news is this is for free. So I'll put the link in the video description. You can just clone it and work with it in your project. Let me share my screen so you can see what I am talking about. So in this template, when you check from the solution, we are following clean architecture. So definitely we're going to have our code in layers. We have 4 layers here, and I believe if you have watched my clean architecture videos, you know what each layer does. We have application, domain, infrastructure, and now presentation. And I've also created a folder as test, but there's going to be an update. This is my first version, so I'll also implement that in the later videos. Maybe you and I will do it together. Okay, so let's focus on the code itself and forget the test for now, which actually will come later on. Now, in our domain, we having our entities and value objects. So, our entities are models, which we need in order for us to create a database, table, and etc. Our value objects, instead of focusing on the identity, we want to focus on the value. So, value objects, they do not change once you set them. They do not change on runtime. So example is when you have a look with this, priority, we have low, medium, and high. As soon as you run the application, it is the same. You cannot amend that. Okay, and we have entities. So that's where you're going to place all your entities, your models that are going to be using for the GB set. Then in your application, there's an orchestrator. So this is the service layer which orchestrates all the processes. It's amazing. Now, I want to check here. I am having, I think, a common folder dependency and features. Now, these features I'm implementing or following this vertical slice layer. So instead of splitting all your features or your work within layers, we want to organize them by feature. So we have create, that is create DTO. We have delete. We have get, then we have get or an update. So each feature has everything in order for it to work. Now, I only removed the controller, that is the endpoint, but you can also add the endpoint here. And I assembled all the endpoints in the controller because I want to use controller rather than the endpoint. I have no reason for that, but I feel like using controller for this. So if you want to use an endpoint, you can just add an endpoint to each of the feature. Okay. Now you can see from here, so this is a sample one that you can also follow in creating yours. And since you're implementing clean architecture, we're going to be having our command, our handler, then we're going to have our query. That is when we need to make query to the database. And in here, so I have everything over here from our task. That is our create, which definitely is going to be your request. Then we have your command over here, and we have your handler. Then you have your validator. So I'm also implementing Fluent Validator. So that is what I can see, or you can see, you and I, we can see from here, from this, okay? Now I have the same thing for delete, get, and then get all and update. So we are having, if for command, it is create, update, and delete. So these are the 3 commands in CRUD. Then read is query. So I have read, that is get. I have get all, that's also query, and that's read. So I have this is get, and I can see from here I'm having query, and I'm also having query. The rest, they are what? Command. Okay. Now, after we are done here, the one thing I also did was, I created a code base. The reason behind this is, for example, create, update, get, I think they're going to be having common properties. So instead of duplicating them, I decided to extract them as a code base, and I inherited in each to streamline my code. But well, if you want to still make sure you organize your code in one feature, you can skip this and add it in the various folders. Okay, now that is the feature that I'm talking about with the vertical slice. Now, in common, you can see from here we have behavior, data mapping, responses. Now, with the responses, I made this generic so it can work with T model. It could be a single model, it could be a list of T. And any is this is feasible, it's going to cater for that. So you see from here in that you can specify a general one. But with this, to be specific, I made success and failure because in your code, you have to make it readable and understandable. If I return a status, you know that, hey, this is success, this is failure. You don't just return search response and not knowing what it's going to return. You must be specific. So I created that here, but you can still use it in there. And I'll show you how you're going to use this service response. Don't worry. Now, from your dependency injection, from here, we create an application service. That is what you're going to be consuming in our presentation. And in that, when you add film validation, you must register. I also added AutoMapper. If you want to use Mapster or if you want to create your own, you can comment this out and I'll add your own. But if you're looking forward to work with AutoMapper, which is a great package or library, then you can go along with this. And I added a mediator. And in that, you see from line 15, line 16, I added behavior. So we're going to talk about behavior. I'm having login behavior and then validation behavior. Having two behaviors here. Now, when you go back to the mapping, that's an AutoMapper profile. So I did one over here. So you can continue on, or you can even get rid of this and add your own. The structure is the same. Then check here from our data. We are creating our interface for DB context. Why am I doing this? I did not want to create a repository for AppDB context because you and I know that AppDB context by default is a repository. So I want to skip that overhead. I don't want to create a repository inside another repository. So I want to use it straightforward because in CQRS, each is going to handle that. So I wanted to have a way so I can use it straightforward in my handler. And DB context is created in infrastructure, right? And so in order for us to have access to that, we must create an interface so we can inherit it. And that is the reason why I did that. Then from our behaviors, let's go and check. We have login behavior and a validation behavior. So this login behavior is configured as soon as a request is being processed. As soon as the request starts, there's going to be a log. After it is also done, there's going to be a log. So this is a behavior. Behavior takes care of this login. Let's say a process for you without you necessarily need to call that explicitly. Okay. So instead of we logging this in maybe a service, no, or in a handler, no, we're going to leave it that for this pipeline to handle this. And same thing applies to the validation. So I am validating it. So all models, if you can take from here, now with this, we are getting all, check it from here. We want to get this validation context and we want to get all validation context. Now, how do we get it? When you check your validation over here from common, from features to do and a validation, you will see it inherits from this abstract validator. So any class which inherits from this abstract validator will be guarded. So we're going to have that here. Then when we have them, we're going to loop through them. We see from here, we're going to select. We validate each, and then we want to select get the response here and our return. So we throw in a validation exception in case there's validation error. If not, we want to show as soon as we do before we do, we're going to say validation errors. But in case there's no validation for that, let's say there's no error, everything was intact, then we want to say model validation passed. This is just a log that I did, and you can override that. You can just get rid of that. I just wanted to show you when this runs, I want to see the console, and we can float the console to read what our system is doing. So logging is very important. Do not forget to log all time. Then check for, so that's our behavior. So we've registered them also in the application service. Now I want to check the next one. I think we are done with our application layer. Now we're going to our infrastructure. Now, infrastructure, that is the which persists data. But since we're doing that with the interface in the application, we can go to the infrastructure and configure our task. Now, when using Fluent API, you need to configure it manually. Maybe you can also do that, and you're using this entity type configuration. So when you have two models, because currently I have only one entity, which is to do. Let's say I have two models, product and maybe category, and there's a relationship. You can configure that using this Fluent API pattern to work it on here. And you can see from here, I am also, although I have validation here for the client side, but the database also, I'm also having another layer of validation. So even if, let's say, if somebody tries to overpass the application validation, when it gets to the database, well, there's also another validator sitting there waiting. So we are having like a layer of validation, and that's amazing, yeah, to protect our system. So when working with a system which is to be secure, I think you might have a thought on this and try to consider in your configuration. Then we have a dependency container, and in there you can see from here, I am also adding health check. So I'm adding this database, and I have this database over here, and I'm having this health check. So you can also check the system. I'm using SQLite. So I want to connect and see whether my SQLite is connected and also our system. So that's what you see. I'm having this health check and this database. So there's an API and there's a database. And the next one that we're doing here, that is the persistent. In our migration file, we can see that after we're done with the configuration, we're going to see all those here. So from the file that we created, not this one, initial, we're going to see everything from our table. You see it is nullable, max length, and etc. because we did that in the configuration type. And then we go to our DB context, and you know what? We create our DB context. That's the normal stuff. But here, this is the interface that we created in the application. We got to inherit from that. And then we save changes by implementing that. Then on model creation, we want to perform all configuration, apply them. And when we check from here, we have configuration created in the configuration folder. So this is going to get automatically and I implement it while it performs the migration. All right, and that's great. So the next thing that we're talking about here is what? I think we are done. Let's say the presentation. And in here, with the presentation, we also created an extension. So we have a controller first, which encapsulates all the endpoints that we have in our features. That's, I already said this. If you want to move each to a file within the feature, you're good to go. We can do it. But well, I like using controller a lot, so I think I want to stick to that. Then we also have a dependency service here, and with this injection, you see I have created some services here, so I want to inject it so I can grab this and inject it in the program.cs once and for all. But while you can override that, you can go straight and I'll add it. And here I am just adding, I'm having some scalar with authentication because before you can allow authentication in your API, let's say scalar, which is the new one, you must configure that, like same as the Swagger. So I did that over here, and let me show you. I also created an exception, so I have folders for each exception. That is a global exception handler. It is good to handle that in the presentation. So I'm having global exception handler. We're going to handle any external exception that I did not handle. And in that, I'm having this title, and as you can see from here, I want to display something like error and the message and etc. Yeah, so that is this one. Then from our extension, we have in this application builder, and that's where I'm mapping this Scalar API reference because when you install scalar.esp.NET Core, you must map the pipeline. So I am mapping it over here. I am not mapping it in the program. It's a third package that I installed, so I want to make sure I have it separately mapped. And then I have my migration extension. So not all the time that when you're done building your application, you need to, after adding migration, you need to go to the console and type in update database. Now, what of in production? What I'm going to do where you do not have Visual Studio? So in there, you need to create an extension for that. And as soon as you run the application, your default code base set up to migrated get performed. And oh, we're going to have a database and all the tables and etc. that you have created. And that's what I did here. So the next one was to create a service collection, and that is where I am specifying the skill authentication. So here since we're going to be having a bearer token, I'm adding that to the header. Scheme is the header, the type is an HTTP, and where am I going to add it to the header? And there's the format. So I add that. This is going to authenticate us. It's going to allow us to apply token to the header in the Scala UI before we can make an API call. Although this system, I did not add JWT authentication to it because maybe you can decide to skip authentication. Okay, you can decide to add it. So I did not add authentication. I believe you can add it based on my videos that I have done with authentication in API. Okay, and then that is all. So when you check from program.c as well, I added, I used the presentation, I used the here application, presentation, infrastructure, specifying the configuration, and here I'm using Serilog, so I'm adding to the host. And then when app is in development stage, I want to apply the migration. Then I want to add the health check, use Serilog request login, and I'm using the exception handler. And here using this middleware. This is the pipeline, authentication, and authorization. So that is a simple, streamlined template that combines clean with vertical slice architectures whilst implementing CQRS. Yeah, so I'll make this available and you can use it. If you have any issue with this, you can let me know. You can let me know. If you want to have any further clarification, maybe you can write to me. Now let's see how, maybe let's run this test out. Let's check for my health also and see whether everything is intact, and then I can push it out to GitHub and give you the link for free download. So the app is running. Now let's check the console and see what we are doing. So when you check this console from here, we are having all our logins. Migration is being performed. As you can see from here, create database if not exist, and etc. We have all these stuff also, and here they say that no migration were applied because I ran it before making this video. So definitely I haven't added anything new, and so this would not be applied. But in case of at your end, I think when you change this to SQL Server where you have a new database, there you go. You need to get that run. And then from here, we are listening on this, and we are still in the development stage from here. So we're going to make a request from this. Let's say we're going to make a post request. No, this is a get request. Make this check from our log. And you can see from here, we haven't, let's see. So bearer was not authenticated. Yes. When you check from my endpoint, bearer token, now we can go in and add a token, right? You see it hasn't appeared here. But since this endpoint does not need any authentication, we don't need that. So this is our service. So, I told you I'm going to show you how the responses can be used, and I did not, right? I have my data, then I have my maybe complementary messages alongside with it. I have a lot of records here. So check from the last end, its access is through, and our message is tag found. Okay. Now, this means this is working. I wanted to show you the controller, not the console itself. And let's see the login. So model validation passed. But we know for queries, we are not validating model. So maybe we can go to the behavior and now check if the endpoint is get. That means we want to skip this validation. We can actually go beyond that. But leaving this will not cause any harm to your system. Now let's see. I'm also logging the request on the console, the response rather than the console. So all that you see on the screen, you got to see them here. And at the end, let's see what we're doing. We also want to have, okay, so it's completed this. We have here, its access is through, right? And this a message type found, this a type, and that's great. That's great. That's great. Okay, now let's close this and Okay, before that, I think let's have another um, post. Now with this post, this is a title. So new title now, description, new description is okay. Now priority, I'm going to have high. Then due date, oh, I should put high due date. And I'm not sure this is going to work. You know the format of date. So we're going to have an issue with that. And I'm not sure this will work here unless I get some date and provide it here. Okay, so maybe let me check if I can get it from the console. This is a due date. Let me grab one. Yeah. Let me paste it. And it's completed. It's false. This task is not completed. Let's see if this is going to work with the due date. And of course, we got it. That's created. Let's check the console. So from the console, it's starting from here. Validation pass here. Okay. Now, model validation is passed, right? So we are making a command, as you can see from this, and this is a response that we get. So whatever thing that you do, you're going to have validation model, that's a log, and you can also log all what you did, so you can see it on the screen. Okay, now let's close this. So our endpoint is ready. It's working perfectly. Now check from the handler how we use a service and how we are orchestrating all this. It is coming from the feature. So when you go to the feature, let's take the create, for example. From this handler, we are saying that, hey, validation will be handled by the behavior. So if you see from here, I am not validating that manually to be handled. Then maybe, oh, no exception. No exception is handled in the presentation. And I'm logging also be handled by the behavior. So you can see I'm not logging over here. And that's making this neat and clean, isn't it? Only few lines. The rest are being handled by the behavior. Okay, then we're going to, so we map it over here and then we can call our context and save it up. The same thing applies to the rest. For let's say, this is for delete. And you can see for delete, we do the same thing. We can see we are not checking for validation because it will be done automatically by our behavior. All right, so that is this. I'm going to push this. Okay, so you can just have time and go through. I think what I've done so far, you've gotten, let's say, the view of it, isn't it? Get the template and I'll go through for it. Now, in our next video, maybe this is a next update. We're going to work on the test. Let's see how we can see the dependencies. You know, the layers that we have. We know that from the solution, the domain should be in the middle. Shouldn't have any dependencies, right? And then application should depend on the domain. So we need to add domain to the application. And then the infrastructure should depend on the application, not the domain. And the infrastructure and the presentation should also use the infrastructure. Now let's see, although we have it, to verify it manually, when you check from project, from your domain, you check from dependencies, you see it has no dependency. Go to the application from project, you see it has the domain, and that's fine. You're following the order. And now when you check from the infrastructure dependencies, you might see that, hey, you got application, and then from presentation, hey, you have this. Project, you have infrastructure. But you know, when you publish this application, you cannot verify this. So maybe you can have a test to see. And in the next update version that I'm going to come out with, maybe I'll have a video you and I will do together so that you know how it flows. Okay. And we're going to handle that too. So do you love it? If yes, then check the video description and then grab this template now. So you can have a copy and now work with it in your future project. All right, so if you like this video a lot, give me a thumbs up, okay? And also, if you haven't subscribed to this, then you do subscribe because this channel has a lot of videos for you. So I'm going to catch up again in the next video, which is talk about, I don't know, but let's see. All right, so take care, friends, and I'll see you again.